Hi, welcome to PsychoBible. I'm Andrew Rodriguez. So I did something over the past couple of weeks that I had never done before. I called my state senators and voiced my concerns about a particular bill. What bill is that? That's H.R. 5, the so-called Equality Act. It's actually a very deceptive name for the bill. We'll get into that in just a moment. So this bill actually already passed through the House back in May, and now it's moved on to the Senate. Who knows when they're going to vote on it? They've been holding on to it for a little while. But you don't know. They may vote on it at any time now, maybe before we break for July 4th or when they return from the break. So I want to make this video to encourage you to voice your concerns if you share the same concerns as I do, to really let those who are about to vote on this next know how you feel. It already passed the House. Every single Democrat voted for it, and even 8 Republicans in name only, including here in Pennsylvania, Brian Fitzpatrick, voted for it as well. You know, on one hand, I could say, well, maybe it's because they don't want to look bad, because who wants to vote against a bill called the Equality Act? But I'm not so sure that they really care what it's called. They know what it's about. You can read the bill, you know what it's set to do. So, what is the Equality Act, or H.R. 5? Let's take a look at the bill, and I'll give some commentary on why this bill is dangerous and we should be opposing it. So you can do a search online. You can find the bill pretty easily. Just type in H.R. 5 or the Equality Act, brings you right to the official page, or at least it's one of the top results, and you can read through the bill itself. Now, what the proposal is to update the 14th Amendment and the bill that prohibits discrimination based on sex and race to include a little parenthetical addition to sex, to include sexual orientation and gender identity. So right there, that's quite an issue, considering how those two terms are very ill-defined and not really agreed upon in the scientific community. And so they want to solidify that and canonize a left-wing version of those terms in the law. So, to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation, and for other purposes. So this isn't just about that. They threw in a couple other things in this thing first. And they make sure people know they can cite this as the Equality Act. It's not about equality because it's definitely promoting only one viewpoint, and it's not a scientifically based viewpoint or anything based off tradition throughout all of human history. So it's a radical viewpoint, radically new and dangerous viewpoint. So it's not treating things equally because it will cause discrimination to those who hold a traditional view and a scientific worldview on the issues of sexual orientation and gender. So let's keep going. First, you have this whole section called findings. That's quite frankly, it's a ridiculous name because these aren't actual findings. Most of these are just declarations without any support. Let's read through some of them. Some of them are just obvious. Some are just regular LGBT activists and radical feminists and just typical left-wing socialist talking points. 3. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. Which is such a stupid one. Queer is just like a free-for-all term. Referred to as LGBTQ people commonly experience discrimination in securing access to public accommodations, including restaurants, senior centers, stores, places of or establishments that provide entertainment, health facilities, shelters, government offices, youth service providers, including adoption and foster care providers, and transportation. Okay, that's quite a list, but notice the key words there. Commonly experience discrimination. Commonly? Stores, restaurants. We're in Gay Pride Month right now. It's June, the end of June. Every major company is sporting that rainbow flag. Common discrimination? Yeah, no. You've got a few instances of wedding service providers who don't want to participate in using their creative skills to help celebrate a gay union, and usually it's based off their religious convictions. And that's the minority. That's most people they'll bake the cake. They'll put beliefs aside or religion aside, and they'll just bake the cake. It's a business. But we have a few high-profile cases because they've been targeted. So if anyone's been discriminated against, it's actually the service providers. Adoption agencies, foster care agencies. Yeah, if you're a religious one, they've shown some discrimination, and that's sort of their right because they want to make sure that they're placing among families that are going to support their religious worldview and their family values. Not to mention they want to do what's best for the child, and studies have shown children do best with both a mother and a father. And on top of that, we're starting to get results in from research on gay parenting, and it's showing there's actually quite a few detrimental effects. So it's not just, well, they need a mother and a dad, meaning they need two people of either sex, and that's better than none, but we're actually finding that the children are worse off when they have gay parents. So now this isn't for every case. You're going to find an exception, sure. But there's been some studies. You can look up Walter Schumm's research. I'll probably put a link to some of his research that will show exactly what I'm talking about. So society has already been changing so pro-gay at this point that a bill like this is frivolous at best and oppressive at worst, because it will now outlaw those who hold to a more traditional and historically accepted viewpoint on sexuality and marriage. So what's the need for this bill? Already, if you just let the markets work themselves out, the LGBTQ community is not going to be discriminated against. If anything, those who hold to a traditional view are the ones who are going to face increasing discrimination. So this is definitely going to undermine any of the efforts that Trump has put in place recently to protect religious freedom. Forms of discrimination include the exclusion and denial of entry, unequal or unfair treatment, harassment, and violence. And those are just such broad terms. This discrimination prevents the full participation of LGBTQ people in society and disrupts the free flow of commerce. You know what actually disrupts the free flow of commerce? Lawsuits against bakers who don't want to bake a cake for a gay wedding. That disrupts the free flow of commerce. So you want to let the markets work themselves out instead of trying to bring a socialist mentality to everything. Now here's where things get really ironic. Women also have faced discrimination in many establishments such as stores and restaurants, and places or establishments that provide other goods or services such as entertainment or transportation, including sexual harassment, differential pricing for substantially similar products and services, and denial of services because they are pregnant or breastfeeding. That is the most random part of the findings. What does this have to do with anything? And we already have in place in the Constitution the protection against discrimination based on sex. So why do you have to mention anything about women being discriminated against because of their sex? There's something else behind this, most likely. But it's ironic because on one hand, they're going to try to promote equality for women and protection for women against discrimination. But as we proceed, you're going to see how the transgender agenda is completely contrary to any sort of women's rights movement. Number 5, many employers already and continue to take proactive steps beyond those required by some states and localities to ensure they are fostering positive and respectful cultures for all employees. Many places of public accommodation also recognize the economic imperative to offer goods and services to as many consumers as possible. Well, if this is the growing trend, why do you need this bill? Number 6, regular and ongoing discrimination against, regular and ongoing discrimination against LGBTQ people as well as women in accessing public accommodations contributes to negative social and economic outcomes. And in the case of public accommodations operated by the state and local governments, abridges individuals' constitutional rights. So, public accommodations would include bathrooms, showers, locker rooms, changing rooms, dressing rooms, fitting rooms. Not like that makes too big a deal. But anything in which we usually differentiate based on sex, biological sex, now they're trying to say that the LGBTQ population is being discriminated, as well as women. Why are you throwing that in there? Women aren't being discriminated based on that. At least not biological women. So I think they're trying to do a bit of a Trojan horse here by saying, well, no, trans women are really women. So when you deny a trans woman access to facilities, then you're discriminating against all women. Trying to take a high road approach to the potential risks they're going to bring to actual biological girls and women by allowing biological men into their facilities. It's deceptive. It's disgusting. Now, number 7, pay attention. The discredited practice known as conversion therapy, which is interesting they put that in quotes, because no one in the field actually uses the term conversion therapy, but I'm not going to play semantics because we all know what they mean by that. They mean any form of therapy or sexual orientation change efforts, which is a little too broad. That's why those in the field prefer the term safety, sexual attraction, fluidity exploration in therapy. So that's a term that those who are actually professional therapists who provide help for people with unwanted same-sex attraction, they prefer to use that term. But the LGBT activists and just the fear-mongers on that side like to use the term conversion therapy because it evokes imagery and ideas of coercion and using aversion techniques like torture and electroshock and ice baths, all things that we don't use. It's absolutely ridiculous. So they're going to continue to use that term, even though it's not used at all in the field. But who cares? I know what they're referring to because they're not just referring to the aversive types or the forced type of therapy. They're referring to any sort of help for children, adults, voluntary, whether it's therapy that because the client's being pressured by their parents to come or because the client is willingly coming and sincerely wants to explore potential for change in attraction and same-sex behavior. For whatever reason, could be because of religious reasons, could be because they just want to explore their heterosexual potential. But no, the left hates that. The LGBT activists hate the idea that people could possibly change or have the option of pursuing change. And it's not because it's actually harmful or unsuccessful. There's been growing a whole movement called the Once Gay movement and the Change movement. And then we have the Freedom Marches that just marched recently, showing that change is possible at different levels. Could be in attraction, could be in behavior, could be in identity, but change is still possible and is voluntary for these people that are marching and making their stories known. So they're creating this complete boogeyman that conversion therapy is this terrible practice that is out there to either dupe people or scare people into treatment, and then they force this harmful treatment on them and they leave and they're now extremely suicidal and we have the blood of all these people on our hands. It's just disgusting. So what they say, the discredited practice. Really? Discredited? Got any research to cite there? No, they don't. There's maybe 2 studies that show people reporting some sense of harm or decreased self-worth after attempting some form of SOCI, or sexual orientation change efforts, but it's not even clear if it was professional therapy that they're pursuing, if it was some sort of self-help group or pastoral care. And usually it's retrospective, such as the Shidlow and Schroeder study, which pretty much was showing its bias at the very beginning by using advertisement exclusive to gay magazines, gay bars, saying, have you been harmed by homophobic therapies? Please contact us. Is that objective research? No. And that's like the main study that they use when they say that, oh, this type of therapy is harmful. Well, of course, you're going to get a biased sample, people who tried therapy. I don't even know if they actually tried therapy or what they tried, or if they were forced into it by their parents, but they came out dissatisfied. That says nothing about how effective and safe the actual therapy is. So just because you get people who are disgruntled by therapy, you're going to find people disgruntled even if they come for therapy for depression or drug and alcohol treatment. You can find all sorts of unsatisfied clients because there's always a significant number of people who are not helped by therapy. It could be for multiple reasons. They're not ready, they had a bad therapist. Doesn't mean that the whole practice is bad. Gosh, you want to get into unethical practices. You know, if we held the same standard that our other mental health or drug and alcohol concerns that we hold to, or the left holds to, reparative therapy or other forms of what they call conversion therapy, you would get rid of the whole practice. Because if you look at all the ethical violations by psychologists, particularly sexual violations with their clients, it's insane how many people take advantage of their clients and enter into sexual relationships with them. That's just that sort of violation. Do we get rid of therapy? No. Anyway, I can go into this way too much. Back to HR 5. The discredited practice known as conversion therapy is a form of discrimination that harms LGBTQ people by undermining individuals' sense of self-worth, increasing suicide ideation and substance abuse, exacerbating family conflict, and contributing to second-class status. I haven't seen a bigger lie that could be put into a bill than that. Sheesh. Anyway, I'm going to have to do a few videos just explaining how much a myth it is that conversion therapy or sexual orientation change efforts or safety is harmful and ineffective. Complete myths that everyone is just falling for, so that even conservatives want to distance themselves from the practice because we've let the left control the narrative. So they throw that one in. Interesting that they throw that in because the bill itself doesn't have anything about conversion therapy, but that's put in the findings so it can pave the way to outlawing the practice in general nationwide in a later bill. Number 8 is pretty much redundant, saying that LGBTQ people and women face widespread discrimination. Once again, it can lumping women together. Now they're part of the LGBTQ movement, apparently. 9. Federal courts have widely recognized that, in enacting the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Congress validly invoked its powers under the 14th Amendment to provide a full range of remedies in response to persistent, widespread, and pervasive discrimination by both private and government actors. Okay. Number 10, discrimination by state and local governments on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity in employment, housing, and public accommodations, and in programs and activities receiving federal financial assistance violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. In many circumstances, such discrimination also violates other constitutional rights, such as those of liberty and privacy. That's interesting, they throw in privacy when you're violating the privacy of girls in school locker rooms and bathrooms when you allow a biological male to go into those same facilities. So the irony of that one. under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Oh, another thing about number 10, liberty. So what about therapeutic choice? So are you going to say that people should still have the liberty and freedom to obtain the type of therapy regarding their same-sex attraction as they would like? Or no, there's only one option, gay affirmative therapy. Is that what you're saying? Because that's not liberty. So the irony there, it's ridiculous. Number 11, individuals who are LGBTQ or are perceived to be LGBTQ have been subjected to a history and pattern of persistent, widespread, and pervasive discrimination. Really? You still gonna say this in 2019? Like, really? On the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity by both private sector and federal, state, and local government actors, including in employment, housing, and public accommodations, and in programs and activities receiving federal financial assistance. Make note of that. Receiving federal financial assistance. So who is that targeting? That's targeting Christian universities, Christian schools, Christian colleges that receive federal financial aid. So if this bill passes and you're a Christian university that has a morality clause about sexual conduct, or you say you provide married housing, but it's only for heterosexual married couples, yeah, say goodbye to your federal financial aid. So that's going to be a lot of Christian schools who are not going to be able to continue to operate. And, a lot of them are struggling as it is. Okay, there's a number of points here that are about the levels of poverty among the LGBTQ population. And the insinuation is that it's because of discrimination. However, they don't provide actual citations about that being the cause. Because that's a very complex issue. You can't just say that's the cause. Such as here at the bottom of point or finding number 15. According to other studies, transgender people have half the homeownership rate of non-transgender people, and about 1 in 5 transgender people experience homelessness. Are we to say that's because of discrimination? That's what the insinuation is. Could it be because they also have a multitude of other mental health issues? Is the link simply their mental illness and drug and alcohol issues and who knows what else? Discrimination might play some part, but you need a little more data than that. Then with 17, it says, numerous studies demonstrate that LGBTQ people, especially transgender people and women, are economically disadvantaged and at a higher risk for poverty compared with other groups of people. There could be multiple causes for that. For example, women in same-sex couples have twice the poverty rate of older different-sex couples. I'm not even sure how accurate all that is. And of course, they're going to make their appeal to why we should just open the floodgates to allow all gay couples to adopt and foster. So point 19, numerous studies document the shortage of qualified and available homes for the 437,000 youth in the child welfare system, and the negative outcomes for the many youth who live in group care as opposed to a loving home, or who age out without a permanent family. Although same-sex couples are 7 times more likely to foster or adopt than their different sex counterparts, well, obviously because they can't reproduce on their own, many child-placing agencies refuse to serve same-sex couples and LGBTQ individuals. You know, it would be nice if we stopped funding Planned Parenthood and took those same funds and helped reduce the cost for adoption. Maybe we'd get more couples like my wife and me to be able to adopt. This has resulted in a reduction of the pool of qualified and available homes for youth in the child welfare system who need placement on a temporary or permanent basis. Barring discrimination in foster care and adoption will increase the number of homes available to foster children waiting for foster and adoptive families. But the other question you have to ask yourself is, statistically, are gay couples stable enough to be a healthy home for all of these children? When you're familiar with the actual data, you'll see that Promiscuity is very common in gay couples. Having open marriages is pretty much the norm, at least among male homosexuals. And then if you want to talk about lesbian couples, they usually have a form of animus against male children, so they definitely have a preference or bias toward females. But like I mentioned before, the outcome studies are showing detrimental effects of being raised in a home with gay parents. So I'm not so sure that that is the best option. Now, it may be better than them not being in any home, sure. However, a Catholic or Protestant adoption agency should have the right to show preference to a couple that matches their own values, because a heterosexual married couple is going to provide the most stable home, assuming that's still a loving home, that will give the child what they need for development. So, are we trying to actually care about children, what's best for them, or just promote the gay agenda? So those are all the findings. Let's get into what the bill actually wants to do. So by inserting sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity, before or national origin. So basically that's the line they want added anywhere the term sex is put. And where would this apply? By striking stadium and all that follows, and inserting stadium or other places of or establishment that provides exhibition, entertainment, recreation, exercise, amusement, public gathering, or public display. What is public display? Basically any place. This could include a Christian retreat center, obviously gyms and their bathrooms and locker rooms and showers. What else could be public gathering? Could that include a church? Do a church will they no longer have the right to say who they'll allow in which bathrooms? With this law, it sure seems like they won't have an exemption. And this would definitely throw out any progress we had with Jack Phillips and Masterpiece Bakery. With point 4 here, any establishment that provides a good service or program, including a store, shopping center, or online retailer or service provider, salon, bank, gas station, food bank, service or care center, shelter, travel agency, funeral park, anything pretty much, would be covered by this bill. Let's keep going here. Section 4, desegregation of public facilities. So they're going to make sure that you can use any public facility based on your orientation and gender identity. So say goodbye to all those bathroom bills that made sure that people would use the bathroom based on their biological sex, or that we make special accommodations. So, that would be the most sensitive thing to do with a transgender student is make a special accommodation, maybe have a single bathroom or a staff bathroom they can use. Because sometimes I wouldn't even say it's safe for them to be in the bathroom with their biological sex, where they could be facing bullies there if they're still in transition of some sort. So I do want to be sensitive to that, and most church schools want to be sensitive to that. But with, say, the guidance given by Obama back in his administration, they couldn't even do that. They had to allow them to go into the bathroom with their gender identity, thus violating the privacy of the usually girls. It's usually going to be male to female that's in this case. Section 1107 claims. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993 shall not provide a claim concerning or a defense to a claim under a covered title or provide a basis for challenging the application or enforcement of a covered title. So basically this nullifies the religious exemption, which we shouldn't even be fighting, because I hate when we try to base our opposition to the gay agenda based on religion, because there are plenty of other reasons why someone would object to their agenda, and reasons why someone would say, want to pursue change-oriented therapy because they see that what it's most aligned with their biological imperative. So you could be coming from a completely secular, evolutionary, Darwinian perspective on homosexuality and not even have a religious basis for opposing homosexuality or wanting to work through unwanted same-sex attraction. So this is the danger we get in when we just base our arguments on religion, because then they can make a little exclusion in their bill that would prohibit us to use the Religious Freedom Restoration Act or any sort of religious liberty argument to oppose application of this bill. So to recap, there's several points why we should be opposing this bill, at least if you have any sort of common sense, not to mention if you have any convictions about what gender is, what religious freedom, about people's right to choose for themselves how they deal with conflicts over their sexuality. So this is a very dangerous bill, and it would create a totalitarian state. So first, and not necessarily in any particular order, the findings, like I said before, they're not findings. These are unsupported declarations. They don't provide citations. They don't provide how they came to these conclusions. In some ways, I would even challenge some of the points made as being valid at all, especially when they use such vague language. Well, discrimination happens regularly, pervasively, commonly. It's like, really? You're still saying that in 2019 when every company right now is sporting the rainbow flag, that discrimination is so common, where you get a whole month dedicated to celebrating your sexual deviation from normative sexuality. Okay, right. Okay. Next, it mentions women, but this bill will totally undermine women's rights and privacy. It affects female sports, which we're seeing more and more that these trans women, biological men, are just crushing women in competitions, and there better be a backlash, because if this continues, you're going to see the whole purpose of female sports being undermined. If you're not successful in your male sports, claim you're a woman. You don't even have to actually provide some proof of transition for you, because how dare you question someone's identity? So there's no actual objective criteria required. So I could just, at a moment, especially with this idea of gender fluidity or even gender non-binary, I could say, well, today I feel like a male, or yesterday I felt like a female, but today I feel like a male. Well, that's convenient. So, and there's no, it's not like you have a card you carry that say, I'm a certified transgender. No. So when it's just based on what's something in your head, mental concept, really a delusion, as unfortunate as it is, we let that be the basis for a law. That's ridiculous. The amount of damage this will do. It'll hurt girls getting scholarships based on athletics. It will undermine the safety of women in shelters, in women's home for women being battered by men. You could have a male show up there, and just by virtue of him claiming to be a female, they wouldn't be able to deny that male and potentially re-traumatize all these women. Totally undermines privacy in bathrooms and showers and changing rooms. So how does this help women? The claim against conversion therapy, I went into that. That's completely unsupported. And even though the actual bill says nothing about banning conversion therapy, if this gets put on the books, then you already have it. It's a stepping stone to then outlawing any form of therapy for people with unwanted same-sex attraction, which they're trying to do it for minors in multiple states. We have at least a dozen states now that have banned any form of sexual orientation change effort for minors, but they're continually trying to do the same for adults. Like right now, they're constantly trying to to pass something in California. There was last year AB 2943, which Evan Lowe pulled last minute, but he's back with ACR 99. It's even would require pastors that in the way they talk about homosexuality, that it has to be supportive and affirming. Like that's even worse than AB 2943. And this one's going below the radar. So it's already passed one committee or group. I'm not sure how it's. This is a strange type of situation with this bill or proposal, whatever it is. But you have to pay attention to what's happening in California, because California was the first state to pass the ban for SOCI for minors, and then it was like a wave from the West. So whatever happens in California is going to eventually happen in all the other states. And if you think you're in a pretty conservative state, well, watch out, because all of these liberals from the coasts, and it's like all their liberal policies that are increasing their taxes are making them want to move out. So they move out of these liberal states and go into traditionally conservative states, and they run for office in those states. Like right now you're seeing in these traditional states like Texas, Oklahoma, where these liberal politicians now running the show and trying to pass legislation that would ban reparative therapy, ban safety, that would promote a one-sided view on gender and sexuality. So it's coming everywhere. You're not going to be safe. I don't care what state you're in. So we need to protect this at a federal level, that we support common sense when it comes to what gender is, science, what gender is, not just religious view on what gender is, but something that the most like evolutionary, scientifically based atheists would agree upon, that gender is determined by biology. It's not a mental concept. We've allowed the left and the LGBT activists to control the words and the language for far too long. We need to take it back and remind them what the definitions actually are. So with gender, with just people who are just plain libertarians who care about freedom, get them to see where we're coming from on these issues when it comes to therapy for unwanted same-sex attraction, and put out the research that shows there's actually no supporting evidence that it's in general harmful, and actually more evidence to show that it has been helpful in increasing well-being, even if it's not as successful in changing the orientation. But there's also results or studies that show a change in orientation, and there's even more studies coming out. So we need to get the word out on those things, and at least we're having the change movements and the Freedom March that's helping to get the word out, but of course they're being ignored by the mainstream media, of course. So yeah, it's a stepping stone to get that wording in this bill. They're definitely going to go for the whole practice in general once this passes. If you're a Christian school, Christian university, this bill will totally undermine your ability to get funds from the federal government, or maybe even the state and local governments. Because when you listen to, say, at the Democratic presidential debates, Kamala Harris make the point about busing. She was saying, well, if a municipality is not following something that we believe should happen on a nationwide level, then we need to come down with federal force. So that same logic will be used. And she also said that that's the reason why she's pushing for the Equality Act. So you see that it's all on their agenda to make sure everyone walks like goose steps to this bill. Adoption agencies. Even though studies show children are healthiest and develop best in a home with a heterosexual couple, you will have to give these children to gay couples, whether you like it or not. And of course, this is a violation of religious freedom, but increasingly our society cares less and less about that. So to be a believer in this country will get to the point where you will have to speak with some level of understanding that you may be fined or imprisoned for speaking the truth about gender and sexuality. So if you want to actually put your money where your mouth is on things, be careful. Okay, so like I said, I called my state senators here in PA. That's Bob Casey Jr., Democrat. I'm hoping he'll go against his party and against his colleagues. I know his father used to be pro-life, so I'm hoping he still has some family values, some conservative values in his own convictions, and he'll stick to them. And then Pat Toomey, Republican senator. So I contacted them both. Now, I'm just cold calling. I'm not comfortable doing that. You may not be comfortable doing that, but I had to because they say that if you just sign a petition, they don't care about that. It's when they get personal letters, personal voicemails, and calls from people. That's what helps sway their vote. So even though I was uncomfortable and kind of nervous because I'm like, I'm just making a cold call. Well, both times I got a voicemail, and I don't like getting voicemail either. So I left messages and just try to give some of the points about why I'm concerned about this. And I'll probably follow up with some emails as well. So do whatever I can to really lay out my points. And maybe I'll link to this video too. But if I can do it, you can do it as well. Make your voice heard. You want to protect children? You want to protect women? Like, if you actually care about women, you would not be for this bill. So we need to bring back some sanity to our society, and if we got to protect that sanity and bring it back through legislation or opposing this legislation, then that's what we got to do. Can't just be fatalists. All right? Well, I hope this encourages you, gets you riled up to stand up for reason and morality and just good science and psychology. So please follow up. We got a limited amount of time. Who knows when they're going to vote on this in the Senate? Trump has already said that he is opposed to parts of the bill, but who knows how they might change it to make it more palatable. I don't like any of this. None of this should be passing at all. And I don't still trust the Supreme Court. If it passes and we bring it to Supreme Court for review, I still don't trust them yet. So we got to fight this at the legislative level as much as possible first. All right. Those are my thoughts. Please like, share, subscribe. Take care. God bless.